Hello everybody. The world of Don't Starve has been alive and thriving for over a decade now. In that time, the game has grown and flourished into what we know it as today, but as time has moved forward, so did our understanding of the universe this game has created. Old theories became disproven, rumours became truths, and falsehoods were redefined so that people would stop believing in them. In the early days of this game, the story of everything and anything was mostly up to interpretation. We had no animated shorts or anything. But now, we have several years of wisdom and clarity that we didn't have in the past. So what better way to celebrate the legacy this game has created by going over the history of some of the old, outlandish theories and common misconceptions about the lore and history of Don't Starve. Let's look at things many used to believe, and even some things people still do. Wagstaff's true identity, the origin of Thulecite, and even a little bit about the ancients' backstory. Also, for the sake of this video, I'll only be focusing on big broad theories that I remember from my extended time with the game. I'm not going to look at random crack theories on the forums made by a single guy, which talk about how Warsox is secretly the reincarnated form of Wickerbomb's dad or something. I don't want to harass anyone in this video or make any enemies today, so we're keeping it broad. Anyway, enough preamble. Let's start with a personal theory that was very popular back in the day, and one kind of perpetuated by Clay themselves. WX78 is still human. When WX78 was first added to the game many years ago, Clay didn't really have a full plan for what the character was meant to be yet. All that they knew at the time was that they wanted a cool robot in their silly video game. All of the stuff we know and love about them now wasn't even a twinkle in John Clay's eye. One of those things they entertained the thought of, however, was, what is WX78? Are they a fully autonomous robot? A cyborg, human/robot hybrid? Or even just a boy pretending to be a robot? Or even a robot that thinks they are a human trapped inside a robot's body? Early on it was never really specified or declared what exactly WX78 was, so it led a lot of people to explore what they could be, and this even included Clay themselves at the time, as we mentioned, stating that the early concept for WX was, are they a boy trapped in a robot body, or are they a robot that thinks they are a boy trapped in a robot body? And it was left open-ended for fun. Keep in mind this was before Clay made WX being non-binary canon, so ignore the boy part of this conversation. Most people leaned on the case of them having some form of human body inside their robotic casing, and the biggest explanation for this were two things. First of which, the lightning situation. Being struck by lightning in this game reveals that WX78 has a full human skeleton inside them. As well as that, dying as them will spawn a human skeleton, just like it does for every survivor. Now at the time, this seemed like very valid reasoning for declaring WX as either a human or a cyborg, since what use would a robot have for having a human skeleton inside them? But that reasoning could quickly fall apart when you realise that whenever anyone gets electrocuted, their skeletons always seemed off. Characters would have bones in their hair and clothes, and even non-human characters would also produce human skeletons on death, though this is mostly a DST thing since non-human characters were rare back then. This means that the whole skeleton aesthetic with electrocution and corpses holds no correlation to the survivor in question. Either Willow has bones in her hair and Wendy has bones in her skirt, or it's a simple visual gag by the developers. I mean the Constant itself. After all, everyone stuck in the Constant is merely a pawn, no more human than what the world needs them to be. But as time went on, we got some actual solid confirmation on the WX78 organic situation. Namely, in their animated shorts. I could talk leagues about this, and I already do in an upcoming video, but the part we're mostly interested in is when Winona is fixing them up. We can see her rummaging around inside WX's chassis, and there's not a single hint of a skeleton or any human parts inside. Smoking gun, case closed, WX78 is a fully autonomous robot that somehow was created in secret back in the 1910s by two dudes in a lab. Don't think about it too hard. Also, if you consider skins canon, which I guess they are, ambiguously, then the existence of two skins completely disproves the fact that there's a skeleton inside them. The unfinished skin shows parts of their body missing a shell with no bones in sight, and the experiment skin shows them with an empty head, just like me. But there's also the case of WX's actual body being kept under Wagstaff's floorboards, as is discovered by Wilson when he moves into his old home in his animated short. But the more you think about why Wagstaff would keep WX's old body under his floor instead of disposing of it, the stranger it becomes. The identity of WX-78 was a simple thing to believe at the time, but a strong case of something that was never fully clarified before becoming absolutely clarified. But that doesn't mean the old theories of WX being part human were ever wrong, it's simply what we knew at the time. And this is confirmed as well because Clay admitted even they didn't know at the time what their plan was with WX. But time marched on as always, and we got the WX we know and love today. But now it's time we look at another old theory, or in this case, a common misconception. The identity of these two. Now, anyone who is big in the lore sphere of Don't Starve already knows the frustration about what I'm about to go over. If you have no interest in Don't Starve lore, then get comfortable. Also, I'm surprised that you made it this long. So, you know the ruins, the big evil cave biome underground filled with ancient statues and cool technology of a far bygone race of what looked like weird crab people? Over the years, we've been drip-fed lore about this empire through ARGs and even some animated shorts. But among this backstory, two prominent figures are shown being the apparent rulers of the empire. This person and that person. Now, the misconception I'll be talking about today is the identity of these two people. We know that one of them is called Mephius, a name passed around in several places, but mainly attributed to the name of one of the puzzles you can do off the game in order to get that sick Cain skin. But it's also a name mentioned in-game by the big evil skeleton boss, the Ancient Fuel Weaver. Because you get the Cain skin from the Mephius puzzles, people assumed that the ancient leader that held the Cain was Mephius, which would make sense, right? Well, yeah, it would make total sense. There was also a similar puzzle called the Cyclone puzzles, where you'd get a torch skin. The same torch skin that the other leader is prominently seen using. So then this one is Mephius and this one is Cyclone, yeah? Well, no, not at all. This is where things get a little bit iffy. Now, I have an entire video going over this topic, check it out in the top corner, but to summarise it, the Ancient Fuel Weaver was the ancient with the cane from the murals, the one that created food from shadows and ultimately led to the downfall of the ancient race due to his over-reliance on nightmare fuel. This is evident by his quotes during the battle, which all heavily allude to the fact the Fuel Weaver is the cane bearer. But the quote that confirms that the torchbearer is Mephius, this one right here. The torchbearer was originally reluctant and dismissive of the cane bearer's use of nightmare fuel for their people, and originally sought to close the ancient gateway. So when the Fuel Weaver attempts to close the gateway for Mephius' sake during his battle, it all but confirms it. Also some cultural evidence, Mephius is short for Prometheus, who was a titan from Greek mythology who took fire from the gods. So, you know, torchbearer, someone who has fire being called Mephius makes total sense. Again, I'm massively summarising it, check the aforementioned video for a more in-depth overview, but essentially, this one is Mephius, and this one is... well, we don't know their exact name, but I think Fuel Weaver would fit perfectly fine, as that's exactly what he did in life, weaving nightmare fuel into food and other items for survival. As for Cyclone, a name attributed to Fuel Weaver thanks to the Cyclone puzzles, it's simply not a name. Cyclone is just Latin for cycle, and was given as the name of the puzzles to indicate the start of a new cycle in the story of Don't Starve, Charlie and Mephius' new reign. The story of the Ancients is a long and winding one, and with confusing moments like the puzzle names not lining up to the names of the owners of the skins that they provide, a case of a theory that took some time to pass, and a couple more steps of knowledge over the years to fully crack. Well, fully crack for all we know. I could totally be wrong and be disproven in a matter of updates, but that's the fun of making theories. Some are right, but most of them are wrong, and it's fun to look back at what led you to those wrong conclusions, because hindsight is 20/20, and what is right back then could have been the only thing that was right back then. Remember, the person who never makes mistakes never ends up making anything. But enough sappy stuff, let's move on to a more crack-like theory, also tied to the Ancients funnily enough. A personal favourite of mine, and one that I believed for a long time. Thulecite is people? Yep, you heard that right. Back in the day, a few of us thought that Thulecite was the petrified remains of the husks the ancients left behind when they metamorphized into the shadows that lurk in the ruins to this very day. The main reason many people believed this old theory was simply because it kind of makes sense. You have all this mysterious evil material from a forbidden civilization that nobody knows the origin of, and all of the survivors seem convinced it's haunted. Those statues you see lining the halls? What if they were not statues, but instead the petrified remains of the very bodies that once walked those halls? Heck, even mining them would sometimes spawn a shadow, as if it was a soul escaping from a long petrified corpse. Some of the survivors even mentioned that the statues were throbbing, or even possibly alive in some form. But just ignore the fact the walls were also made out of Thulecite, and that this also meant that the ancients were making tools and armor out of bones. Which isn't too far-fetched, to be honest. Anyway, this was debunked when they added the Ancient Archive. Not only did this area predate the ruins and the ancients' traversal into a subterranean life in the lore itself, but it also housed dust moths, which, when fed a compound of rocks, salt, niter and, well, typically twigs, would decorate their little tidy dens with Thulecite. It's probably moth poop. My favourite thing about all of this, even Maxwell is disappointed that this is the true origin of Thulecite, almost as if he was one of the old believers of this silly theory himself. We've spent enough time down in the ruins, let's go back topside and talk about a theory so many people believed in, and one you still probably could if you try hard enough. The renowned Wagstaff is Wilson theory. Oh boy, here we go. Now, transport yourself back to the year 2019. Oh god, make sure you tell everyone what's going to happen over the next year. But after you do that, put yourself in the mind of a budding Don't Starve fan, logging into their favourite quirky survival game and seeing a brand new DLC Hamlet waiting for them. But instead of playing the DLC, they play the single player game and see that Robert Wagstaff was added as a playable character. The elusive Robert Wagstaff that was mentioned all the way back in 2013, the inventor of the Voxola radio company, the one in charge of all those funky evil radios that Maxwell used to transport people into the Constant. But you notice that this guy bears a lot in common with another character in the game. The crazy W-shaped hair, the desire for science, the nerdy attitude. He kinda reminds you of Wilson. Yeah, a lot of people back then drew the connection that Wagstaff was Wilson from the future, just because they look the same and kind of have a lot in common. Now, there was no Wanda in the game at this point, so time travel was an abstract cause when it came to the lore of the game. Well, unless you count the whole Woodlegs being a pirate from the future and even possibly the past who somehow found themselves in the 1910s solely thanks to a weird quote about waffles, so there was no confirmation of time travel being a concrete part of the lore in Don't Starve together. However, it also was not deconfirmed either. But there were some doubts at the seams of this theory. The main one I remember seeing is that Wagstaff has nothing special to say about Wilson if he ever saw him on the Nightmare Throne, just using his generic quotes instead. You would probably think a guy would have something to say if he saw someone that resembled an apparent younger version of himself stuck on an evil lounge chair, no? However, it wasn't until a few years later would we get the smoking gun evidence that Wagstaff is indeed not Wilson. First of all, Wilson and Wagstaff would interact yet again when Lunar Rift content was added to the game, and having absolutely nothing special to say about the other. But more importantly, we were given crucial lore through the numerous animated shorts Wagstaff turned up in. The most important one for this case? The Wilson animated short. This short shows Wilson and Wagstaff interacting as they both diligently help each other on whatever silly invention Wagstaff is conjuring up. And as you probably can notice, none of them are interacting in a way that implies the two ever knew each other or are each other. Except for the moment where Wilson gets a flashback to when he moved into his old house and, oh my god, never mind, he is Wagstaff! Or he just moved into Wagstaff's old house. And this scene was a cheeky nod from the developers to the legitimacy of this crazy Wag Wilson theory. And if things couldn't get any more confusing, Wanda was added to the game around this time too, so we got official confirmation that a form of time travel was now possible in the universe of Don't Starve. But, as is on brand for Wanda, Clay wouldn't explore the topic of time travel or even Wanda herself at all until a few years later as a throwaway bit in an anniversary short. Yeah, it wasn't looking good for the believers. However, all hope was dashed in the projection short, which shows us a younger Wagstaff on his road to discovering the constant, and we can see that even a slightly younger Wagstaff bears little resemblance to Wilson at all. Light brown hair instead of black, poor eyesight instead of Wilson's seemingly perfect eyesight, and patchy poor attempts at facial hair compared to Wilson's magnificent beard. As far as I'm concerned at this point, there's no way these two are the same person, let alone related, which some people also believed. Maybe distant cousins twice removed at the very least, I guess. This theory was a very prominent one back in the day, and it's fun to reflect on how the drip feeding of new lore and information slowly drowned the theory out. With how Clay even referenced it in Wilson's shorts, I take it they either made the connection on purpose, or were taking a playful jab at us for thinking of such silly stories. Not me though, I never believed in that theory. I only believe in real theories like Wirt used to be a pigman. Sure, there's probably still some hope in the Wag Wilson theory if we start thinking about how alternative timelines and universes do kind of exist thanks to that one scene from the anniversary short featuring Wanda, but if we start allowing branching universes and time travel, it opens up the possibilities for anything to be true in the future. The second the Don't Starve cinematic universe goes multiversal is the moment all the theories become true, since in a world of infinite universes, there's gonna be at least one universe where Wagstaff is old Wilson. Let's hope Clay doesn't want to jump the shark just yet. Oh hey Water, oh never mind then. But let's end this video on one more theory that was lost to time, and what better one than I guess I gotta mention the Woodlegs one I talked about earlier, huh? So there's this big theory that was very popular at the time of Shipwreck's inception, that Woodlegs came from the future due to his quote for waffles mentioning that his mother opened them from a packet, despite packaged waffles existing long after Don't Starve actually takes place. This implies that Woodlegs was taken from the future. Made doubly more confusing since Woodlegs is a stereotypical 17th century pirate who is somehow still kicking around in the 19th century. It's a massive mess that has technically never actually been disproven, and with my luck, never will. It's a massive case of a character's quote breaking continuity. There's plenty of cases like this, from Wilson referencing MC Hammer with his quote for the hammer, Maxwell referencing how gold tools are game logic, and even how Woody references Garfield when he inspects monster lasagna. Okay, that one might be a stretch. Sometimes Clay just writes quotes for characters because they're funny or silly or they just fit. Sometimes they break the fourth wall, and sometimes they make mistakes, like not looking up the year of waffle packaging being invented. Who can even blame them for that after all? And keep in mind, Shipwrecked wasn't even made in-house by Clay, it was outsourced by another company called Cappy Games. So, who's to say that team had a full grasp of the universe of Don't Starve as much as Clay did? Not to say they didn't do an amazing job though, they did great on that DLC. But despite all of what I just said, as much as it pains me to say, this theory still could hold ground. Could. We don't know how time works in the Constant. Bunch of years could pass in the real world as time in the Constant moves backwards, forwards, and sometimes even sideways. But seeing how most events of the game take place around the early 19th century, it's a safe assessment to make that the game solely takes place around that time period. But much to my chagrin, it's only an assessment. One day we'll know the truth. One day. When they add the Woodlegs to DST, please Clay, I really think it would be cool. Just as a treat, I deserve it, I've been so good to you. So you know what? I think that's a good place to end this video for today. I also want to give a massive shout out to Kesia for the idea of the video, a lot of the topics we went over, and of course the beautiful thumbnail. Go give her a follow, her socials are in the description. Theorizing about anything is fun, especially when it's a silly little survival game like this one. I hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the history of theories of Don't Starve. Back in the day we had very little to work with, so I'm grateful nowadays Clay actually gives two about the story of the game as much as they do. It keeps me in a job at least. But I still appreciate all of the early day theory crafting, and I honestly can't wait to see how outdated and stupid some of my theories will become in a few years. Let's check back in then, yeah? But until that time arrives, have a lovely day everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys have any old theories you'd like me to look at, then drop a comment down below. But until then, take care everybody. Bye bye.